Do Crohn's disease symptoms keep coming back? Tremfya guselkumab may help. At 12 weeks, rapid symptom remission was achieved in most patients taking Tremfya, and some experienced visible improvement of their intestinal lining at 12 weeks and 1 year. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible and ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Hello, I'm Sarah.
I'm Toby.
And welcome to another episode of Season of the Witch. This episode is all about
The Witch of St. Osyth.
Yes, so we've got one long story and this is another British witch. Are you ready for the story?
Yes, I am.
In the quiet coastal village of St. Osyth in Essex, a dark chapter of history still lingers. It's the story of Ursula Kemp, once a local healer and midwife, later condemned as a witch in the year 1582. Ursula Kemp, sometimes recorded as Ursula Kemp, was born around 1525 and became known in St. Osyth as a cunning woman, a practitioner of folk healing and midwifery. In an era when doctors were scarce for country folk, villagers often turned to such healers for remedies. Kemp earned a meagre living using herbs, traditional rituals, and what little medical knowledge was available to treat ailments. She had a reputation for unwitching, lifting curses or illnesses believed to be caused by witchcraft. By helping neighbours with charms and restorative brews, Ursula became a valued, if slightly mysterious figure in the community. As a midwife, she brought babies into the world. As a folk healer, she tended to the sick and infirm. In short, Ursula Kemp was, in her better days, considered a good member of the village who used her skills to help others. But life for a 16th century wise woman was precarious. The same powers that made Ursula respected could also provoke suspicion. If a patient recovered, she might be praised. But if misfortune struck, whispers could easily turn against the healer. Ursula's standing in St. Osyth began to unravel after a series of personal disputes and tragedies that would soon be woven into accusations of witchcraft. The events that set Ursula Kemp on the path to the gallows began in the winter of 1581. A neighbour, Grace Thurlow, sought Ursula's help with her infant son. Davy fell dangerously ill. Kemp responded as the village expected. She visited the Thurlow cottage and applied her healing arts. By one account, Ursula quietly took the ailing child's hand and murmured words, possibly an incantation, as if to carry away the sickness plaguing him. Remarkably, that night young Davy slept peacefully for the first time in weeks and soon recovered. Grace, 6 months pregnant at the time, was relieved and grateful. Ursula likely hoped this good deed would secure her standing with the family. As Grace's pregnancy progressed, Ursula anticipated being hired as the baby's nurse or caretaker after the birth, a common role for a woman of her skills. Cunning folk often acted as midwives and postpartum caregivers. But when Grace Thurlow delivered a baby girl named Joan in mid-1581, she chose another woman as her nurse instead of Ursula. This decision sparked a bitter feud. Feeling spurned and insulted, Ursula confronted Grace, angry that she had not been given the job of tending the newborn. Grace, for her part, had begun to fear that Ursula's powers were not entirely benign. During one heated exchange, Grace accused Ursula of causing her recent bouts of lameness through witchcraft. Ursula hotly denied it, insisting that, though she could unwitch, she could not witch. By this, Ursula meant that she could break curses, not cast them, and even offered to show Grace how to unwitch herself or any other at any time, if Grace would dismiss the new nurse. Grace refused the offer, and tensions remained high. Tragedy struck the Thurlow household soon after. A few months into baby Joan's life, the infant fell from her cradle and died from the injury. The death of little Joan, only a few months old, was a devastating blow to her parents, and a dangerous turning point for Ursula. In the wake of this loss, murmurs spread through the village, suggesting that the misfortune might not have been entirely accidental. Under the pall of grief and suspicion, Grace Thurlow's attitude toward Ursula turned from resentment to outright accusation. Not long after the baby's death, Grace herself fell ill with a crippling lameness in her legs, likely an arthritic condition. In desperation, Grace once again sought Ursula's aid to heal her painful affliction. Ursula, ever confident in her remedies, agreed, but this time she asked for a fee of 12 pence for her services. She treated Grace's lameness with her customary folk methods. Sure enough, Grace improved and regained strength in her legs. But when Ursula came to collect her payment, Grace refused to pay, claiming poverty. Another furious argument erupted. Feeling cheated, Ursula allegedly threatened to get even with Grace for going back on the deal. Shortly thereafter, Grace's lameness turned worse than before. To Grace it seemed all too clear that Ursula had bewitched her, inflicting the very malady she had briefly cured. In her mind, Ursula Kemp was no longer a helpful healer, but the cause of her family's suffering. Grace Thurlow wasn't the only neighbour who had begun to suspect Ursula of dark dealings. Another local woman, Alice Leatherdale, had a run-in with Ursula that would later surface in court. Alice had refused to give Ursula some scouring sand, a simple cleaning material, when Ursula asked for it, dismissing her as a naughty beast. Shortly after, Alice's own daughter, young Elizabeth Leatherdale, fell mysteriously ill and died. According to Alice's testimony, she had seen Ursula murmuring or muttering under her breath near the child. When little Elizabeth succumbed, Alice was convinced that Ursula's muttering curse had killed her. It seemed that whenever Ursula quarrelled with neighbours, misfortune followed. A sick child here, a lame leg there, a cradle death in another house. In the fear-charged atmosphere of 16th century Essex, such coincidences were seen not as bad luck, but as the malignant work of of a witch. By early 1582, the whispers about Ursula Kemp had grown into formal accusations. Grace Thurlow went before the authorities to swear that her neighbour was a witch, responsible for her son's illness, her own lameness, and the death of her baby. Others in St. Osyth were drawn in, eager to share their own suspicions and grievances about Ursula's alleged sorcery. The stage was set for a witch hunt in the village. In February 1582, Ursula Kemp was arrested and brought for interrogation before Justice Brian Darcy, the local magistrate. Sir Brian Darcy was well known in Essex as a zealous witch hunter of that era. He had a reputation for taking accusations of witchcraft very seriously, and he wasted little time once Grace Thurlow's complaint reached him. Darcy began examining Ursula and compiling evidence for a trial. It's likely that he already believed he was dealing with a dangerous witch, and he set out to extract a confession. Under the intense pressure of questioning, which may have included threats or promises of mercy, Ursula confessed to practices that sealed her fate. According to Darcy's later report, Ursula admitted in private that she kept 4 spirits or familiar demons at her command. These familiars, she said, took the shape of common creatures. Tighty, a grey tomcat, Jack, a black tomcat, Pygiene, a black toad, and Tiffin, a white lamb. 2 of them were male spirits that could kill people, and the other 2 female spirits who could inflict illness or harm livestock. Ursula's confession went on to recount how she had used these spirits. She claimed, for instance, that she sent one of her boy spirits to lame Grace Thurlow as punishment, and dispatched another to kill Joan Thurlow in her cradle. She also allegedly admitted sending a familiar to murder Alice Leatherdale's daughter out of spite. Crucially, Justice Darcy also involved Ursula's 8-year-old illegitimate son, Thomas Rabbit, in the investigation. Young Thomas was persuaded, we might say coerced, by the magistrate to give evidence against his own mother. In court, the boy corroborated Ursula's tale of familiars with chilling detail. He testified that he had seen his mother's 4 familiars himself, describing the cats, toad and lamb by name, and that he watched her feed these impish creatures with beer, cake, and even her own blood as nourishment. Thomas added that he once saw his mother give an earthenware pot containing these spirits to another local woman, Alice Newman, who supposedly used them to kill a man and his wife in the village. It's hard to know how much of this testimony was true, coached or imagined by a frightened child, but it undoubtedly had a powerful effect on the judges and jurors who heard it. As Darcy's inquiry continued, Ursula was pressed to name other witches in the area, perhaps hoping to lessen her own culpability, or under Darcy's direction. Ursula identified several other local women as accomplices in witchcraft. She initially gave up 4 names: Elizabeth Bennet, Alice Hunt, Alice Newman, and Marjorie Salmon, who were promptly arrested. Those women, in turn, under interrogation, pointed fingers at more villagers: Jane Petchy, Cicely Sells, Elizabeth Eustace, Agnes Glasscock, Margaret Revel, Annis Hurd, Alice Manfield, Anne Swallow, and Jane Turner. By the time the hysteria had run its course, around 13 or 14 women from St. Osyth had been caught up in what became one of the largest witch trials in Essex history, They would later be known collectively as the Witches of St. Osyth. It had all begun with Ursula Kemp at the centre. In late March 1582, Ursula and the others accused alongside her were brought to trial at the Chelmsford Assizes, the county court in Essex. The proceedings began on 29th of March 1582, overseen by 2 judges of the Assize Circuit. Ursula herself faced multiple indictments under the Witchcraft Act of 1563, including charges of murder by witchcraft, specifically the deaths of Grace Thurlow's infant Joan and Alice Leverdale's daughter, among others. Witness after witness came forward to tell their tales of Ursula's supposed maleficence. Neighbours spoke of sudden illnesses, dying cattle, and strange misfortunes that they squarely blamed on Kemp's spells. Grace Thurlow surely recounted how her disagreements with Ursula were followed by her child's death and her own mysterious lameness. Alice Leverdale likely described the spiteful muttering that preceded her little Elizabeth's death, and young Thomas Rabbit's sensational testimony about the animal familiars would have been a highlight of the trial, confirming every lurid suspicion about witches consorting with the devil's minions. Unsurprisingly, the jury found Ursula Kemp guilty on all counts of witchcraft, resulting in death. The prescribed sentence under English law was death. Sometime in 1582, Ursula was taken from her cell and hanged by the neck at Chelmsford, the county town. Records indicate that another of the accused St. Osyth women, Elizabeth Bennet, was executed alongside Ursula as well. Elizabeth Bennet, notably, did not even contest the charges against her, perhaps resigning herself to fate, and so she too was condemned to the gallows without a full trial. The other accused women from St. Osyth met various fates. Some were acquitted or released in the months and years afterward. One, Alice Newman, was found guilty, but reprieved and eventually pardoned. But for Ursula Kemp, considered the supposed ringleader of this coven, there was to be no mercy. Ursula's execution took place at a time of fervent witch hunting in England. The case was deemed significant enough that Brian Darcy himself published a pamphlet about it shortly after, entitled A True and Just Record, detailing the confessions and evidence. It appears Darcy was keen to justify the trials, portraying them as the righteous unmasking of a deadly witch conspiracy. To the public, Ursula Kemp's hanging was presented as the removal of an evil threat. If the story ended with Ursula Kemp's execution, it might have been forgotten. But in St. Osyth, Ursula's tale took on a life of its own, quite literally, in the case of her bones. For centuries, there was no known grave for Ursula. Executed witches were often buried in unmarked or unhallowed ground. Then, in 1921, a sensational discovery put Ursula Kemp back in the headlines. Workmen digging in the garden of a cottage on Mill Street in St. Osyth struck something hard about 6 feet down. They had uncovered a human skeleton. The remains were of a woman, and notably, the body had not been placed in a coffin. Even more ominously, iron spikes or rivets had been driven through the skeleton's joints, pinning the corpse's elbows and knees in place. Locals immediately thought of the village's famous witch. Could this be a skeleton of Ursula Kemp? Another skeleton was reportedly found later that year as well, similarly buried without a coffin. The 2 sets of remains were soon said to be those of Ursula Kemp and Elizabeth Bennet, the witches hanged in 1582. The detail of the iron bindings was crucial. It matched old folklore practices for dealing with suspected witches or other evil beings. Driving iron nails or stakes through the body was meant to prevent a witch's ghost from rising out of the grave. Whether or not one of the skeletons truly belonged to Ursula Kemp, the remains quickly became a local attraction. The first skeleton was found in the back garden of a man named Charles Brooker, and Mr. Brooker lost no time in turning it into a tourist spectacle. He charged visitors an admission fee to view the witch's bones in his garden shed, and even sold postcards featuring the discovery. People came to St. Osyth to gape at the supposed bones of the infamous Ursula Kemp, now a dusty skeleton, curled where it had been cast into the earth centuries before. Over time, the remains changed hands and locations. Eventually, the skeleton believed to be Ursula's was acquired by the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle, Cornwall, many miles away, where it was displayed in a coffin lined with silk. In the 1960s, the museum's owner even adorned the exhibit with iron nails laid alongside the bones at the points where they had been driven in, emphasizing the superstition-laden story for visitors. Later, in the late 1990s, an eccentric artist and collector named Robert de Kenwicks purchased the remains, keeping them in his personal library as part of a larger cult collection. After his death in 2002, the bones were returned to the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle for a time. Eventually, further study revealed that the remains were not those of Ursula Kemp at all, but of a young man in his 20s. Even so, the legend has become inseparable from the bones. In the early 21st century, the skeleton was finally brought back to St. Osyth. There, in a quiet corner of the cemetery, it was laid to rest in an unmarked grave. So another one, this particular story sounds a lot like the Salem witch trials, because you can see the same sort of hysteria going round. These women must be controlled, you know, that kind of thing. Any sign of power, and we put them down.
Yep.
How many women died? It's just, I try not to think about it too much because it just gets me angry, and then I'll start ranting. Ranting and raving. And just got to put it down to the ignorance of the time.
Yes.
But try and come for me and I'll be sending toads.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
We will indeed. We will catch you again on Sunday. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.
If this back-to-school season, talking to your teenager sounds like this. With Boost Mobile, make it sound like this. Come to your Boost store, get a line, and take home a tablet for only $99.99. Perfect for staying connected and studying anywhere. They're happy, and you save. Visit your nearest Boost store. Requires ID verification. New $20 per month tablet plan and $35 device setup fee. Taxes extra.